Yeah, what's good, Joe? It's your man, the Bigga P, and just after spending some time going on my forums and stuff, talking about the fight, I decided let me just do my video real quick because it's getting real late. Um, the one card. Overall, yes, it was a good night of boxing. I know I can't complain. Well, I can complain in some aspects, but not everything. I'll just start from the bottom to the top. The first card opener was Kano versus Theophane. Pablo Cesar Kano versus Ashley Theophane. Now, I originally thought that Theophane would at least get a late stoppage of Kano, because Kano, while he's a tough guy, I've never seen him as anything other than a guy that if someone wants to make a name for himself in the division, which is 147, I believe 147 or 154, depending on wherever he's trying to fight. They put him in there and he look good, or they don't look good, or they get into a war and somehow Kano loses. And I expected nothing less from Theophane since he's actually in Floyd's camp. And what I got was pretty much a 10-round beating that he took from Kano. And I couldn't believe that. I'm like, really? I'm like, Theophane, like, this man gave Danny Garcia all types of problems a couple years ago. And you let him crude Kano, like, beat you up like this? I couldn't believe it. And they tried to give it as a split decision, but I was like, no, no, it was no damn split decision. I guess no, they can't let the money team fighters lose convincingly on the cards. Even though if you see the fight, you can say that he was just outmatched. Props to Kano though. That man cannot be in any boring fight whatsoever. Um, Watchable fights with old Morales, watchable fight with Paulie, and a watchable fight with the faded Mosley. All of them were very, very watchable, entertaining fights, and this one was no different. So I'm definitely looking forward to him opening up another major card in the future. As for Theophane, yeah, probably needs a little bit more work. Back to the drawing board, if and see if you can rebound from that. Um, Second fight was Ishe Smith versus Carlos Molina. It's for Smith's middleweight, junior middleweight title. Now, before it was supposed to be a fight that was scheduled in July, until Ishe got his injury. Yes, and it was scheduled all the way to this pay-per-view. I mean, I don't mind because, like I said, it's a pay-per-view, and um, it was like, hey, he's a champion, get him a pay-per-view payday, him and Carlos. Um, the fight itself was the struggle fight of the night. There was no question about that. It was an ugly, 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 ugly affair. Molina doing what he like pretty much because they're light hitters with good chins. So usually when you have a fight like that, a fighter with those two combinations, you can only do so much. I mean, unless they were actually just wailing at each other. That's not the case. Carlos came to fight. And while it was not pretty to watch, he was effective. He applied effective pressure on him. Ishe, however, forgot what actually won him the belt against K9, and which was actually attacking him. And he basically just absolutely he did nothing. He was covering up. He was on the ropes. Let out ineffective combinations and flurries. It was just overall, it was a bad performance for him. And Carlos was more effective, but like I said, Carlos is not, like I said, he's not an aesthetically pleasing fighter to watch. But I'm a fan of Carlos because I like spoilers. I'm a big fan of spoilers, especially spoilers who actually give fighters who are either stronger than he is or faster than he is a lot of trouble, and that's what Carlos' career is all about. I mean, damn near all like the wins and also some of the losses. I think with the exception of probably one loss, they were all controversial that should have went his way, or were draws. So, and after watching all those fights, I'm just happy that now he's finally, after all this time, he's finally a champion, and he's the solid number two guy at 154 behind Floyd Mayweather. And I obviously there's not going to be. I just don't, there's no way in hell that fight will ever take place. At least not on pay-per-view. I mean, if that happens, you better put that on just regular HBO, and even then, it'll probably be a struggle for anyone to even want to watch it. But hats off to Carlos and for Ishe. I mean, what do you tell him? Like he's not a young guy. He's old. A rematch with Carlos Molina. I mean, there's no money in that. Unless he actually put it in his contract that he had that he had a rematch clause or whatever. Um, I honestly don't see where he's going right now. I mean, he could rebuild, but like I said, this is not the same guy that we fought on the contender those years ago. He's an aging fighter. He's not what he is, but he's not completely past it. But he's not at the point where it's like, does he get back in the mix at 154? If he doesn't have a rematch clause in there. I mean, we'll see. Like I said, stuff like that. I mean, he disappears and reappears. And I'm pretty sure we'll probably see him in some form, sometime later down the line this year or next year. Um, Then the co-main event, Lucas Matthysse versus Danny Garcia. Now this was a fight. Well, I've never been high on Danny Garcia. Never been high on him at all. Whereas Danny, was knocking out the likes of an old Morales after the second time he couldn't do it, and Amir Khan after getting them hands put on him and going into the decision with Zab. Well, I mean it's not really a bad thing. I mean it's not the first time. Lucas also went to a decision with Zab, but caught the short end of the stick. But there's just something about him that I didn't think was tough. Whereas Lucas was, just mowing down people in the sight. And just had the appearance like a boxer who just is about his business. Not doing not any of that bullshit that he was doing, not trying to draw attention. It was just trains and fights and wins. And I thought this fight would really display what I thought. I mean, I thought Garcia would be done in within 5 rounds, and that wasn't the case. Garcia, like I say, he kept his cool. He showed a good chin. When Matthysse was throwing them bad attention punches in the early rounds. And then Garcia, the combinations and the shots to the body. And then what was even more surprising, because usually Lucas, I've never seen him in actual trouble before. But to see him, well, first it was the eye. He managed to close his eye, and that was alarming. I'm like, oh, crap. And it was funny what Mathisse's corner was doing, because usually with a swollen eye, you're supposed to use the inswell, to bring a swelling. Instead, they were using like the thumbs and pushing the blood out, out of the way. And I thought, that's kind of primitive. I'm like, but then, what happens if your thumb slips, and bam, you slip the eye out or something, But it was funny because, like I said, Danny would swell up the eye. They do that, and bam, Matisse's eye would be open. But I was still holding hope, and I was hoping Matthysse, even with those watching, would at least use a jab to set up his punches. But he wasn't doing that. He was going in, he was going off the end of combination, throwing wild ones, because Danny does have leaky defense, and he was trying to catch him with one of those, home run punches that would knock him completely out. And then I think. And then, like I said, Danny put those combinations on him, and then I think it was in the 11th round he put Matthysse down for the first time. He got him in the ropes, caught him with that body shot, and went down. And of course, I'm like, damn, So because I'm at the point, I'm like, now Matthysse has to either score a knockdown of his own to keep it close. And in I think also in the round he went down. I don't know if it was in this round or in the 12th round. But Matthysse did land a corker of a punch that sent Danny's mouthpiece flying. I'm talking about flying out of his mouth and out of the ring. That got a nice chuckle out of me. But that 12th round, I think Danny finally got the point taken away from the holding and then the low blow, which is cool. And even that low blow, because with that low blow, I think it was like 114. Was it 114, 113, 114, 112? Something like that. If Lucas had actually managed to knock him down, that fight would have probably been a majority draw. Um, that would have been it would have been a majority draw, I believe. But regardless of the situation, like I'll give Danny his props. I was wrong about this one, and he is the man at 140. So and now he put himself now in the Floyd sweepstakes, so to speak, as a future Floyd opponent for next year. So my hats off to him. And as for Lucas, I'm disappointed that he didn't win. I was rooting for him. And but I'm pretty sure Lucas will. I mean, Lucas will be back. Just gotta give him a couple. Just give him a couple. I wouldn't say setups or whatever, but he'll be. I mean, he'll be back, and I'm sure he's learned a lot from this, and then it'll probably make him a better fighter. All right, and our main event was Floyd Mayweather versus Saul Canelo Alvarez. First one was a feeling out round. The first one was pretty much probably the only round you can actually give. If you wanted to give Canelo a round just out of absolute pity, that would probably be the round that you give him. Because after that, it was just straight up. It was a clinic. It was an undressing clinic. I mean, now Canelo had a functional 15-pound or something like that weight advantage. And it was funny too because I thought Canelo would actually come in as a light heavy, but he stayed at 165, and Floyd actually lost weight. He's one of the lucky ones. Besides being a disciplined boxer, his metabolism is pretty much off the chain because it's very rare for a fighter to lose more weight after his initial weigh-in and not have it affect his performance in any way. But then Floyd himself is not a true. He's not a junior middle. He's a welter. Um, he's more effective as a welter, but nevertheless, he pretty much was a clinic. He did what he wanted to. He rolled when he wanted to. He counted when he wanted to. He had Saul figured out early. And what made this fight interesting was the fact that Canelo was coming in. He was aggressive. He was really aggressive about this. Which made it, because if he wasn't, if he did what Guerrero did, this would have been another struggle. It would have been a struggle fight to watch. But it wasn't, because Canelo was aggressive and he didn't mind getting lit up by those combinations. So yeah, Floyd did what he wanted to do. Pretty much from second round to 12th round. Was never in any trouble. Was never really hurt. Wasn't hurt. None of that stuff. And it seemed like his hands held up. So yeah, and so when the scores were, I was expecting to read here 120, 108, or 119, 109. Either of those two scores. And yet, first when they said we have a majority decision, I'm like, oh, okay. Fuckery, yes. We're gonna have a draw. And when I read the score 114-114, I'm like, what? What? 114-114. Who would score this fight 114-114? Because that would basically mean the judge was scoring off aggressiveness rather than actual punches landed, which was because this fight was not no damn 114-114 affair. The other scores were better, they gave Canelo more rounds than I would have given them, but it was better, and Floyd won the majority decision. Now, I assume because this is Vegas, most people who are betting on this fight, because it's how big as it was, probably if they did a prop bet and had Floyd winning on a unanimous decision, and if you didn't do either a 12-round decision or any type of decision prop bet, you lost that bet, and I'm pretty sure, and I'm guessing if my own correlations maybe for if I want to speculate that and correlate that, that is exactly what happened. Yeah, so I know that if there's some gamblers who actually put money specifically on that result, yeah, they were they got they lost money. um, but I think the judge that did it was C.J. Ross. Now, C.J. Ross already herself cost me money before with her incompetent scoring of Pacquiao Bradley. And there she is trying to, basically cause another robbery. She probably should not be judging anymore, or she should be investigated for her scoring because she's a terrible judge. Next to the one for next to the other woman who did those scores for Holyfield Lewis won. I forgot her name, but she I think those two are on a level with just bad overall scoring, and she should probably be removed if nothing turns up in their investigation. But Canelo, I mean, he's young. He's 23. Um, well, I would say he's a young veteran because Mexicans, you start boxing professionally at 15. It is what it is. I mean, even as young as you are, you have 40 fights. You're a veteran. So all he can do is really learn from it. And for the most part, his stamina did hold up. So I can tell he trained out because usually um, he had, his work rate is usually low and he usually huffs and puffs. And for the most part, he actually, he looked decent. Like I didn't see any of the seeing else up that I saw in his previous fights. So most likely he'll just learn from it, and hopefully, like I said, it'll just sharpen up his skills. And I mean, I don't see. I mean, also too, because he is getting big. He is biggest. He is kind of outgrowing 154, but then I don't see him being really effective at 160 either, especially with the type of fights that actually lurk there. So we'll see where he goes from this loss and what he learns. As for Floyd, it's pretty much yes, he did his 2 fights here, and then most likely the next fight he have will be at welter, and we'll be seeing who's going to be his next welter opponent. Whether it's going to be Garcia coming up, or is it going to be Khan, or is it going to be somebody, or basically whoever can take that belt off Devin Alexander. I think Khan is supposed to be facing him in December for that belt, but we'll see. But anyways, it was a good night of fighting, and yep. So I'm about to go back and go through my forms for a little bit before I pass out. Yep. But until next time, peace.